Hi, everybody. Zero fail. So, it's October, a time of apple cider, pumpkin spice madness, everyone on Twitter naming themselves something spooky, and exploitation of historical tragedy. Since 1692, the Salem Witch Trials have ignited the American imagination. The event is older than America itself, yet it continues to resonate. Despite the fact that it had a relatively lower death toll and scope than many of the modern tragedies we face, Salem has been burned into the public consciousness. From Hocus Pocus to Bewitched, it's safe to say the Salem Witch Trials are living rent-free in our heads, drawing more than 700,000 tourists to Salem each year. When 19 innocent men and women were killed in 1692, they set into motion hundreds of years of attempts to grapple with their legacy, and I don't think it's been done super successfully. At least not yet. The city of Salem itself is an interesting case study. Salem tourism attracts history buffs, pop culture voyeurs, and even practicing modern-day Wiccans. But judging by the r/SalemMA subreddit, every year more terrible tourists flood Salem, who only care about the witch hats and kitschy magic shops, and the locals are getting fed up. Frankly, I think the phenomenon is interesting. How on earth did an awful tragedy that resulted in the deaths of 19 people turn a city into a Halloween hotspot?
Rise again. People over here having this fun photo shoot dressed as ghosts. I like it. I dig it. You guessed it. Bewitched in Salem? Line to get inside. Definitely sold out for the day. Don't be left behind. Grab your tickets online. I don't see any palm readings happening in that window over there. That's where I had mine done 6 years ago. Oh, actually, I'm mistaken. There's somebody waiting right now to have their palms read.
It's a fascinating combination of clever marketing, pop culture, and the trend of dark tourism. When I visited Salem last year, and yeah, it was in October.
Why am I wearing sandals? Was it not cold?
I was actually a little disturbed by what I saw. All the over-the-top Halloween costumes stood in stark contrast to the memorial I had just visited, where descendants of the victims of Salem left flowers in honor of their ancestors. The graves marked with the names of the innocent left an indelible impact on me. Then I turn the corner and see a gimmicky potion shop. The city seemed as if it was almost unsure of its own identity. Should they feel remorseful and guilty for the tragedy? Should they be somber and reverent out of respect for the victims? Or should they try and make a profit off it all? Salem right now is trying to do all three of those things. And while I won't say that it's not working, I will say that it is interesting, and there are a lot of facets that can be explored, which is why I'm pretty sure this video is going to be long. Will I be able to edit it by Halloween? Who knows? Regardless, Salem is overrun with tourists, and although it helps the economy, is this witch craze good for the community, and is it a healthy way to deal with the effects of a long-distant tragedy? If we want to talk about Salem, let's start by establishing what Salem really was, behind all the mythology and pop culture. In Europe and European colonies in the 1600s, witchcraft's existence was taken as a given. Christians believed that the devil was active and acted through his own agents, witches. Anything strange could be blamed on witches. Did your cow die? It was a witch. Is your son sick? A witch. Your house burned down? All of it was the fault of your neighbor, who was definitely a witch. There had been a long-running witchcraft craze in Europe, where tens of thousands of people were executed, but American colonies had not yet experienced witchcraft accusations on a massive scale the way that Europe had.
Puritan New Englanders definitely believed in witchcraft, as evidenced by one of the most influential ministers of the time, Cotton Mather, who believed that there were devils among the general population.
In 1692, the Puritan community of Salem, Massachusetts, was under stress. Life in Massachusetts was not easy. Resources were scarce, and winters were deadly. King William's War, which began in 1689, had ravaged parts of the American colonies, leading folks to seek refuge in Salem. This had strained the small village's resources. The stress of the community may explain why young Elizabeth Parris and Abigail Williams began having fits, things that nowadays may resemble seizures. Back then, the only way to explain it was witchcraft. But the fits didn't just afflict two people. Pretty quickly, another young Puritan, Anne Putnam, began experiencing them as well. Under pressure from community leaders, the girls accused fellow villagers Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne of cursing them, as well as Samuel Parris's slave, Tituba. Osborne and Good both claimed innocence. Tituba offered a vivid confession of witchcraft under coercion from the judges. Encouraged by the jury, she set into motion the idea that there weren't just a few isolated witches in Salem. It was a wide, sprawling conspiracy, hundreds of witches hiding in plain sight, preparing to destroy Christians in the service of the devil.
I want to make it clear that I'm not implying it was Tituba's fault that this conspiracy got started. She was heavily influenced by the judges who were saying that if she confessed, she would be spared death, which was true. So it was pretty much the judges' fault that this conspiracy started. One interesting thing that made the Salem witch trials different than the European witch trials was that in Salem, all the witches that confessed were spared death, where all the witches who professed their own innocence were killed in a weird, twisted kind of logic.
What was essentially a conspiracy theory led to the hangings of 18 innocent men and women who had been charged with witchcraft, and one man, Giles Corey, was pressed to death. Yes, pressed. They piled rocks on his chest until he died. By 1697, the community had already realized its mistakes and declared a day of fasting and soul-searching. By 1702, the courts had declared that what happened in Salem was unlawful. The hysteria had passed. Or had it? America still has an obsession with Salem. Witch hunts and the New Salem continue to be potent political metaphors. In the year of our Lord, 2021, I still hear Salem used as a metaphor quite often, 329 years after it happened. Think TERFs saying stuff like, "This is a witch hunt," or "This witch doesn't burn," or this really fun article I found, second page of Google, no less. The new Salem Witch Trials. Today, we have high-tech witch trials. The heretics of our day are those who refuse to go along with the dogmas of the academic and media elite. Hollywood celebrities, BLM hustlers, LGBTQ activists, and other social engineers who are determined to erase many enduring values that made our country the envy of the world. Similar to the Salem witch trials, our mobs were mostly made up of young people. Antifa anarchists tore down statues. At first, most folks in Salem sided with the hysterical girls. As it turned out, the majority got it dreadfully wrong. They almost always do. Someday, the events of 2020 will be so much clearer when we look into the rearview mirror of history. will we be surprised? In his play about the Salem Witch Trials, The Crucible, Arthur Miller wrote a line that should scare us all. We are what we always were in Salem, but now the little crazy children are jangling the keys of the kingdom, and common vengeance writes the law. Oh yeah, Arthur Miller, famously conservative, and his famously anti-leftist play, The Crucible. Gosh, I see why all those BreadTubers like to do dramatic readings.
I feel Lindsay Ellis is a menace, a threat to my child, and is monetizing defamation for personal financial gain.
I've just got to say, I don't think the author of this article would have been on Arthur Miller's side back in the day, but... Side note, this website, The Legacy Imperative, claims to be politically neutral, and it is a very evangelical website. Just wanted to clarify that it's not an explicitly conservative website and denounces the idea of culture war. I didn't want to misrepresent anyone. This article is still really funny to me, though. Also, the website's tagline is Grandparents Forging the Future. Yee, brethren. Oh, and I have a small nitpick to make. The grandpa writing this article says, similar to the Salem Witch Trials, our mobs were mostly made up of young people. I'd like to counter that claim. During the Salem Witch Trials, it may have been the hysterical girls who had the fits and sparked the trials, sure, but we can't take the responsibility off of the adults and judges of the community. The only reason the trials were so successful in killing were because of the judges and the religious leaders of the Massachusetts community. The judges in the witchcraft court of Oyer and Terminer were determined to get as many witchcraft confessions as possible. From all that I've read, the judges seemed to be very single-minded and used their prominence and trusted stature in the community to prosecute accused witches heavily and relentlessly. It may have been young girls that sparked the fire, but it was the adult community, the pastor, the judges, writers like Cotton and Increase Mather, that kept the fire burning. The responsibility for the Salem Witch Trials does not rest solely on 9-year-old Betty Paris or 11-year-old Abigail Williams. The entire community was caught in the madness. Gosh, I feel like Sean right now, like, here's a claim, I'm gonna debunk it. Oh wait, here's a claim, I'm gonna debunk it. Sorry, for someone who's like fresh off the boat from Britain, essentially, I sure do have a bad British accent. Reading that article, I could have just said, okay, boomer. But 1, that meme is dead, and 2, I felt like having a little reverse Ben Shapiro moment. I feel like there are 2 things that people make misguided historical comparisons to all the time. 1, Hitler, and 2, the Salem Witch Trials. Does anyone remember #DictatorBiden? That trended on Twitter for a while. I happened to get into an argument with someone who claimed Biden was a new Hitler, leading us down the path of a Holocaust targeting the unvaccinated. Yikes. Talk about historical illiteracy. It reminds me of the article above, falsely equating BLM protests to the Salem Witch Trials. It just kind of feels like modern Americans are willing to twist Salem's events into whatever they want them to be, make them mean whatever they wish they would have meant. For example, a lot of people see the Salem Witch Trials through a feminist lens, believing that the women hung were persecuted by misogynists and were lost feminist sisters, and as much as that's a powerful narrative, it isn't true. Both men and women were hung in the Salem Witch Trials, and it does not seem to have been motivated by gender. We don't examine the historical and cultural context surrounding events like Salem. We just see, for example, Twitter mobs, which y'all already know I don't like, and immediately jump to the witchcraft comparison. Or worse, see BLM protests, people fighting for human rights, and think, this reminds me of the time a bunch of white people in 1692 hung their relatives. Witchcraft. Heresy. Like, if you're gonna use a Salem metaphor, at least read The Witches by Stacy Schiff first. That way you understand what you're talking about. My point being, Salem is often exploited as a metaphor for political use, usually nowadays to own the libs or make a point about cancel culture. But, of course, the most famous use of Salem as metaphor was Arthur Miller's The Crucible, which used Salem as a thinly veiled analogy for the witch hunts of Joseph McCarthy. Funny enough how people managed to use the exact same event to make totally different points from two different sides of the political spectrum. And to be fair, Salem is a really interesting example and a potent example of the bad things that can happen when large groups of people really believe something that's totally wrong. It's psychologically fascinating, and it's a metaphor rich for literary exploration. I get it. I get the Salem obsession. But in order to understand Salem, to really understand Salem, and to really use the metaphor properly, you have to understand the historical setting it was in, the struggles the people of Salem were facing, the religious beliefs that guided them. They didn't just pop out of nowhere for us to use them as tools in our political debates. They were real people who really lived. There's a lot to be explored here. The dangers of religious fanaticism, psychology of groups. It's just that the real Salem was not a metaphor, was it? What Salem really was a tragedy. I want to emphasize that Salem was a human rights disaster, a moment of mass murder, as well as an illustration of the failures of justice, a look into the dark side of religion. And yeah, it does bother me when people treat it as anything less. In 1993, Hocus Pocus, a movie that I find thoroughly mediocre, but is now a cult classic, was released. Now, I understand. Hocus Pocus is cheesy, nonsensical. It's not supposed to be historically accurate or a hard-hitting drama. But contrast the first sentences of the Wikipedia plot summary for Hocus Pocus with what I just told you about the realities of the Salem Witch Trials. On October 31st, 1693, in Salem, Massachusetts, Thackeray Binks witnesses his little sister, Emily, being whisked away to the woods by the Sanderson sisters, 3 witches named Winifred, Sarah, and Mary. At their cottage, the witches cast a spell on Emily to absorb her youth and regain their own, murdering her in the process. Thackeray confronts the witches, but is transformed into a black cat cursed to live forever with his guilt for not saving Emily. Before their execution, Winifred casts a spell that will resurrect the sisters during a full moon on All Hallows' Eve, when any virgin lights the black flame candle. Thackeray, as a cat, decides to guard the cottage to ensure no one summons the witches. I love Wikipedia. I almost bought a $25 Wikipedia scarf for this bit, but y'all already know I work a minimum wage job, and I already bought this shirt from Jenny Nicholson, so sorry you're not getting the Wikipedia scarf. Hocus Pocus, in all its camp glory, was only doing what Bewitched had done before, launching Salem into the age of the witch kitsch.
Fortunately, the potion I brewed the night we were hanged would keep us alive and young forever. Unfortunately, the recipe for that potion is in my spellbook, and the little wretches have stolen it. Therefore, it stands to reason, does it not, sisters dear, that we must find the book, brew the potion, and suck the lives out of the children of Salem before sunrise? Otherwise, it's curtains. We have had it. We cease to exist. Dost thou comprehend?
Well, you explained it beautifully, Winnie. The way you started out with the adventure part, and then you sort of slowly...
Explain what? Come! We fly!
Because of me, my little sister's life was stolen. For years, I waited for my life to end.
The commercialized goofy witch with her pointy hat, her green skin, and striped stockings. Atlas Obscura captures the weird contradictions of modern Salem pretty well. The strange brew of voyeurism and role-playing, serves to separate the two meanings of witch that Salem has on offer. It's sobering to watch people get ostracized, tried, and executed for crimes they couldn't possibly have committed. It's fun and wacky to pretend to be a glamorous lady with a pointy hat and actual magic powers. I noticed that atmosphere as soon as I got there last year. It's very jarring. The commercialization of Salem is intense and immediate. They even sell Harry freaking Potter merchandise at the Salem Witch Museum. I just cannot get behind that logic. Like, at the witness stand in 1692, they were asking people if they were a Hufflepuff or a Gryffindor. Your Honor, I was picked up by a very strange man with a very large beard, and when they sorted me, they placed me into House Hufflepuff and told me I was a witch, and I was now bound to work for the devil for the rest of my days. She's a witch! She's a witch! Burn her! Burn the witch! Yeah, so that's what I feel like the museum is implying happened when they sell Harry Potter merchandise in the gift shop. Salem's tourism industry is undeniably a moneymaker, making the city millions of dollars a year. It's a cornerstone of the local economy. The commodification of the Salem Witch Trials has been very good for business. Essentially, the business of witch kitsch has put Salem on the map.
Says author J.W. Ocker, "It's a mutual, symbiotic relationship. If it weren't for the fact that everyone wanted to come to Salem and party, the town would be forgotten."
Think of all those tacky, witchy slogans you see in the homes and on the t-shirts of suburban moms around Halloween. City of Salem feels like in October. Nowadays, October in Salem is marked by Haunted Happenings, Salem's month-long Halloween celebration. Haunted Happenings actually began in 1982 as a response to the Tylenol murders. After the Tylenol murders, parents became panicked about their kids being sickened by poisoned Halloween candy. The city of Salem responded by creating a town-wide, child-safe Halloween celebration. Because of Salem's pop culture reputation from Bewitched as the Witch City, Haunted Happenings quickly attracted thousands of tourists, around 50,000 in the first year, which nearly doubled Salem's population for the week of Haunted Happenings. Salem's tourism department calls itself the Halloween capital of the world, claiming that the festivities draw everyone. And they do. Salem in October attracts sober historians, excited pop culture lovers, and actual practicing Wiccans. Each group is approaching the witch trials from a completely different perspective. The power of the Salem narrative is such that all of these disparate groups can find something in it that resonates with them. It'd be dumb to try and make this video without acknowledging the role of Salem's modern-day witches. According to the Haunted Happenings site, today members of the modern pagan and witch communities have a home in Salem. The city's modern witches have the unique opportunity of being able to share their beliefs and celebrations with both locals and out-of-town guests who come to celebrate the Halloween season in Salem. Although many of the historical accuracy variety in Salem find themselves deeply offended by the commodification of these trials, it's been a big boon to the American Wiccan population. Salem, interestingly enough, the city famous for executing 19 accused witches, now has a thriving Wiccan population. Around 800 to 1600 practicing Wiccans live in Salem, most of them working in the witch-themed tourism activities. Modern-day witches in Salem don't find a hostile environment, but rather one of the best places in the world to make a living. Being a witch in Salem is great for business. Salem has become a bit of a New Age haven, a pilgrimage for practitioners of these religions, a fascinating fate for the city that once refused to even tolerate Quakers. So yeah, if you want my opinion, witch kitsch is tacky. It's disrespectful, and it makes the environment of Salem very confused and confusing. But it's also made Salem a more religiously tolerant place. Life's funny, ain't it?
And that's why this is such a complicated issue. The commodification of Salem is wrong. It feels wrong. It feels disrespectful. It's goofy, it's strange, it's off-putting. But it's also made Salem a more tolerant place. It's made Salem a more religiously diverse place. And it has provided something that has become an integral part of the Salem community. To change their Halloween culture, Salem would have to change everything.
If you take a peek at the Salem subreddit, it seems that 2021 was a particularly annoying year to be a Salem local. Witch kitsch-seeking travelers have been drunk, disrespectful nuisances this season. Of course, COVID-19 had something to do with it. Apparently, most tourists have been unmasked, despite being asked to wear one. Some are calling haunted happenings a super spreader event. Yikes! To those who are traveling this year, please, get vaccinated, wear masks. Respect others' communities. Don't be that person. You know, the one who carries a new COVID outbreak or a new variant across state lines. It's not fair. I understand the urge to travel this year. In fact, I'm going on a trip really soon, but I am fully vaccinated and taking precautions. But please, respect the people who live in the places you travel to. Respect the places you travel to. Actually, please do this all the time, not just during a COVID year. But yeah, conscious tourism matters, especially right now. I don't think it's wrong to travel in Year of Our Lord 2021, so long as you're taking precautions and being respectful, which it seems a lot of the patrons of haunted happenings were unfortunately not. Dark tourism has always drawn crowds. It isn't just Salem. I'm sure we've all seen the infamous selfie at Auschwitz concentration camp. Dark tourism brings people to the darkest of historical places, sending tourists to concentration camps, deadly geysers, and morbid museums. The book Into the Wild, about the death of Christopher McCandless, led to Alaskan officials having to remove the bus where Chris died, because at least one other person actually died trying to reach the bus. Morbid curiosity will drive people to an insane degree. People are so interesting. Dark tourism, also known as thanatourism, morbid tourism, or grief tourism, has been defined as tourism involving travel to places historically associated with death and tragedy. I love Wikipedia. It seems dark tourism can go one of two routes. It can become educational or exploitative. Saith Wikipedia, tourists consuming dark tourism products may desecrate a place, and case studies are needed to probe who gains and loses. Chris Hedges criticized the Alcatraz narrative as presented by the National Park Service as whitewashing because it ignores the savagery and injustice of the American system of mass incarceration. When the site of a tragic event becomes more and more like a theme park, it undergoes Disneyfication. Disneyfication is a sociological term that means the commercial transformation of something dark and complicated into something simple, controlled, safe, and sellable. It's easy to say Salem, Massachusetts has been Disneyfied. Quoted in Atlas Obscura, a longtime Salem resident says, "Salem has morphed into a brain-dead Disneyland. That is the antithesis of who the 1692 victims were." The thanatourism, or morbid tourism, and Disnification angle is a really interesting lens to analyze current Salem through, and it certainly is profitable. But is it moral? That's up for debate. And dark tourism kind of reminds me of the true crime podcast industry in a way. If done right, dark tourism and things like true crime podcasts and shows can help people gain a better understanding of terrible events, and might make them more respectful, reverent, or empathetic. However, there are a whole lot of terrible tourists making light of a bad situation, and Salem is no exception. People drawn by morbid curiosity will tend to make bad decisions, mischaracterizing the people involved, and essentially treating it like a game or a piece of fiction, when it was something that really happened and really took people's lives. The identity of modern Salem, Massachusetts during the Halloween season is a reflection of America's response to a crisis that happened hundreds of years ago, and I find it fascinating. Honestly, not that surprised that Americans would choose capital over respect for historical figures, but Salem residents stand on both sides of the issue. Honestly, I don't know if it's super clear-cut. Although I'm obviously one of the sober historian people, Salem is enjoying an economic boom because of this tourism industry. Is it exploitative, or is it helping the community heal? Is it bad that we're commodifying the witchcraft, or has it helped create religious tolerance and opportunity for Wiccans in the community? Is it disrespectful, or is it reclaiming tragedy? Is it sanitizing and twisting the messages of history, or is it bringing the messages of history to a broader audience? There aren't any clear answers to these questions, and the community of Salem continues to grapple with them. It may take us several hundred more years to sort all the way through them. But for now, let's just keep the humanity of the people who participated in them in mind, while also considering the impact it's had on the many generations after. If you decide to go to Salem, though, locals recommend you avoid the Halloween season. They say it's quite nice in the summer or November. Thank you so much for watching. I had so much fun making this video. I'm so glad I finally had the time to do it. Guys, school is insane, but I have had so much fun making it, and thank you for over 100 subscribers. I'm kind of freaking out about that. It's so cool. Oops, sorry. But yeah, I had a lot of fun making and researching this video, and I just thought it was really interesting. If you actually live in Salem, please tell me nicely what I got wrong, because I'm sure I got some stuff wrong, and what you think about this. Yeah, thank you guys so much. I love you.